Hi everyone, glad to have you all back in class for another day of economics. We're going to finish up chapter 3 today, and this is kind of a cool chapter because what I'm going to show you is how the magic of trade works. So this is going to be a little bit of a magic show. So for note-taking purposes, you can just jot this down that this is chapter 3 continued. And I'm going to keep going with the same example that I gave last class just so we don't have to start from scratch. So last class we talked about the Midwest, specifically Nebraska and Kansas, and we said each state can make wheat, they can also make corn, and the maximum yield that they can get in a year is Nebraska can get 50 units of wheat, whereas Kansas can produce 70. In the corn camp, Nebraska can make up to 30 units of corn, whereas Kansas can make up to 40 units of corn. And what we also had was we had PPFs. So I'm going to recreate these for you real quick. So again, PPFs are production possibility frontiers, and they tell us the frontier of what is possible for each producer to produce. We're going to have Kansas PPF along with Nebraska PPF. Okay, C is going to stand for corn, W is going to stand for wheat. And I'm going to try to draw this to scale. Okay, so Nebraska, at most, they can make 50 units of wheat. So they're going to have a coordinate there. Nebraska, at most, they can make 30 units of corn. We're going to connect the dots, and that gives us the PPF for Nebraska. In Kansas, we can make at most 70 units of wheat. Or we could also spend all of our resources making corn and get 40 units of corn. Okay, just as a reminder again, this line is just a sequence of coordinates. So anywhere that you might put a mark on this line, that corresponds to a particular level of wheat and corn. Because it's on the line, that means it is feasible for Nebraska to produce that many wheats and that many corns. And it's along the frontier also, so this would be like a combination they would get if they used all their land and all their resources to produce wheat and corn. Okay, suppose we start out in a world where there is no trade that's allowed between states. Okay, if there's no trade that's allowed between states, and that means whatever Nebraska grows, that's what they have to eat. They don't get to bring any extra corn or wheat in from other states. So if people in Nebraska want both wheat and corn to eat, then they're going to have to make both wheat and corn because they can't import any wheat from Kansas, for example. So let's suppose that to start with, Nebraska decides to split its time between wheat and corn production. And so if they split their time 50-50, then they're going to produce 25 units of wheat and they're going to produce 15 units of corn. And in Kansas, let's suppose they kind of have a similar way of thinking. So they know that there's no trade that's allowed, and so if they're going to eat both wheat and corn, they have to grow both wheat and corn. So let's suppose that they split their time 50-50 making wheat and corn, and so they're going to end up with 20 units of corn and 35 units of wheat. Okay, I'm going to tilt the camera back a little bit so you can see the top of this. Okay, so this is a world without trade. In other words, what you consume is limited to what you produce, and so each state is going to have to produce some combination of all the stuff that they want to eventually eat or consume at the end of the day. Okay, here is going to be the magic of trade. I'm going to give you a preview of the trick, and then I'll walk you through how we get to it. So the magic of trade says... Actually, let's just label this. We will label this magic of trade. Okay, the magic says if, and this is a big kind of if everyone does one of two things, then we're going to get the magic to happen. So the first thing is if everyone specializes in the production of the item they have the comparative advantage in, specializes in the production of the item they have the comparative advantage in. And the second thing is, if they trade with a price between the two opportunity costs, then what's going to happen is, put this down here, make sure it's in big print. It will be possible for each producer to consume outside of their PPF. So it's going to be possible for each producer to consume outside of their PPF. Okay, why is this such a spectacular thing? Okay, the PPF tells us what is possible to produce. Okay, if we're in a world where there's no trade, then the only things you have to consume are the things you have to produce. So if there's no trade, then the production possibilities frontier tells us the frontier of what is possible to consume. Okay, what I've just told you is that if we have these two conditions satisfied, if we have each place, in this case Nebraska and Kansas, specializing in the production of the thing that they have comparative advantage in, and then they trade their stuff according to a particular price, which I'll explain, then at the end of the day, after they swap their goods, then it will be possible, for example, for Nebraska to maybe consume some combination of wheat and corn that's out there. And similarly for Kansas to consume some combination of wheat and corn that's out there. So this is kind of incredible because each state, they're bound by the frontier in terms of what they can produce. But if we get all the conditions right, then although they're producing along the frontier of what's possible, they're actually eating beyond what they're able to actually produce. Both of them are simultaneously. So let me walk you through this and show you how it works here. Okay, the first condition here is I said that each producer needs to specialize in the production of the good that they have the comparative advantage in. Okay, what does specialize mean? So in this context, specialize is just going to mean that each producer spends more than 50% of their time producing that thing. So if you spend more than 50% of your time making wheat, then I'm specializing in wheat. If you spend more than 50% of your time specializing in corn, then you're producing corn, then you're specializing in corn. So just to make sure you have this in your notes, so specialize simply means that the producer is spending more than 50% of their time producing that thing. Okay, one thing I want you to recall from last class. So last class we calculated the opportunity costs for each state and each good. And then with the opportunity costs, we were able to figure out which state had the comparative advantage in each thing. So what we determined was that Nebraska had the comparative advantage in corn production, and Kansas had the comparative advantage in wheat production. So what if, let's just say, we decide to, or the states decide that they're going to really specialize. So they're going to spend 100% of their time making the thing they have the comparative advantage in. Not like 60 or 70%, but like 100% of their time. So if that's the case, then Nebraska, since they have the comparative advantage in corn, Nebraska would choose to produce right there. They would choose to produce 30 units of corn and no wheat. Kansas, if they chose really specialize in wheat production, they would spend all their time making wheat. They would get 70 units of wheat and 0 units of corn. Okay, I'm going to jog your memory for a minute. Let's just recall what the two states' opportunity costs are in terms of 1 unit of corn. So Nebraska's opportunity cost for 1 corn was 1.66666 units of wheat. And Kansas's opportunity cost for 1 corn was equal to 1.75 units of wheat. Okay, what we said was required for the magic of trade to work is that each country specializes in the good they have the comparative advantage in producing. So check, check. And then the second thing was that after the countries have specialized and produced their stuff, then they trade their stuff at a price that's between the two opportunity costs. Okay, so what that means here is the price that will work is going to be 1 corn for some number between 1.66 and 1.75, that many wheats. So let me write and then I'll back up and talk. Okay, the idea here is just to kind of give you some framework. Each country is specialized in their production of whatever. So in Nebraska, at the end of the day, they're sitting around with a whole bunch of corn just stuck in their barns. And Kansas is sitting at home with a whole bunch of wheat stuck in their barns. And Kansas decides, hey, like, I kind of want a little bit of corn. And Nebraska decides, I want a little bit of wheat. So they say, hey, my neighbor in the other state, they've got the other thing that I want. Why don't I just give them some of my surplus of wheat or my surplus of corn, and in exchange they'll give me what they've got. So the price is kind of like the exchange rate. So the exchange rate that will work to kind of create this magic is that these two states need to exchange 1 corn for maybe 1.7 units of wheat, because 1.7 is between these two numbers that kind of bound the region of prices that will work. Okay, so let's just suppose that that's what happens. So let's suppose that they decide on an exchange rate of 1 corn for each 1.7 units of wheat. Okay, so I'm going to put the price that they decided on, we'll say, is 1 corn for 1.7 units of wheat. Okay, let's just start with Nebraska. Okay, Nebraska, again, they've got 30 units of corn sitting in their barns. They want some wheat. They know that this is the price for wheat. Every time they give up 1 unit of corn, they'll bring in 1.7 units of wheat. So Nebraska doesn't hate corn. Like, they want to keep some of their corn. So let's say Nebraska maybe wants to keep 15 units of their corn, and then they want to take the other 15 units of their corn and trade them to get some wheat. So let's just say that Nebraska keeps 15 units of corn, and they give up 15 units of corn. Well, they've given up 15 units of corn, and we know that for each 1 unit of corn they give up, they get 1.7 units of wheat. So Nebraska is going to get 15 times 1.7, which is equal to 25.5 units of wheat. Okay, note that this demonstrates the magic has already occurred, because what Nebraska ends up with after this transaction is they've kept 15 units of corn, The other 15 units of corn they traded, and they brought in 25.5 units of wheat. So now this is what they have to eat. This is like their consumption bundle. So down on the graph, originally this is where they were when they weren't trading. Now they still get their 15 units of corn, but now they get more than 25 units of wheat. They get 25.5 units of wheat. So now Nebraska is consuming this combination of wheat and corn, whereas they're producing this combination of wheat and corn. Okay, let's see what happens in Kansas. So Kansas, they've just given up 25.5 units of wheat to Nebraska. So Kansas just gave up 25.5 wheats. So they have, well, they made 70 units, and they just gave up 25.5. So they have 44.5 units of wheat left. And in this trade, they brought in 15 units of corn. So, and they got 15 units of corn. Okay, so this means that at the end of the trade, Kansas now has a total of 44.5 units of wheat and 15 units of corn. Okay, let's think about plotting this on their PPF. So 15 units of corn is going to be somewhere around here-ish. 44.5 is going to be somewhere around here-ish. And so this is going to be their new consumption bundle. We got 44.5 and 15 right there. Okay, if you actually draw this to scale, I'm not good at drawing, so I apologize for that. When you draw this to scale, what you'll find is that for each state, their consumption bundle exceeds their PPF, or exceeds the boundary of what's possible for them to produce. Okay, so again, I just want to give you kind of like a mental picture so you can understand this. The idea is if we have a world with no trade, or a trade that's not permitted, then each country is going to be responsible for just making their own stuff because that's all they're going to have to eat. So in other words, in the U.S., we'd have to make all of our beef, we'd have to make all of our corn, we'd have to make all of our rice, we'd have to make all of our t-shirts, we'd have to make all of our laptops, we'd have to make everything. In China, they'd have to make all their own beef, all their own rice, all their own t-shirts, all their own everything. And each country is going to have some PPF. So in a world with no trade, each country would pick some location along their PPF. They'd produce that combination of stuff. There's no trade, so whatever they produce, that's what they eat. Okay, under trade, if each country figures out what they're relatively good at, then they should just take all their resources and just like really make that thing. So in the US, for example, maybe we should just like really make beef. And in Venezuela, maybe they should just like really make coffee. And you figure out what you're like especially suited to make. Then in your storehouses, you've got a lot of one thing. You bring some of your one thing to the world stage. Everybody swaps at a particular price. And then when you bring your goods home, the total amount that you have left over in terms of what you've made and now what you've traded, it's going to be some combination of stuff that exceeds what was possible for you to produce on your own. So this is, again, the magic of trade. If you get the conditions right, if you're really specializing in the right things and you're exchanging at the right price, then you can basically eat more than you can make. You can consume beyond what you can produce. Okay, so this is the end of chapter 3. Just FYI, I'm trying to keep the lectures a little bit short because I know it's hard to pay attention for a long time on video lectures. So make sure you're, again, reading through the textbook just to get all the fine details of this. And if anything is still confusing, reach out to either me or the person helping with the tutoring, and we'll try to clarify questions. So shoot out questions now for the next 10 minutes if you have any, and then we'll meet back and we'll do the exercise. It is now time to get some practice doing this on your own. So I have up on the board the same situation I gave you last class. So we still got India, Venezuela. They're still producing coffee, prescription drugs. They still have the same maximum number of units they can produce of each good in a year. Okay, we're going to round out the story now. So what I want you to calculate for today, or what I want you to answer for today, is 4 questions. Question number 1 is, based on this and everything you've learned, which country should specialize in coffee production? So just respond India or Venezuela. For number 2, answer which country should specialize in prescription drug production? Okay, for question 3, I want you to answer what are the range of prices at which the magic of trade would work. So again, as a hint, when countries specialize in the good that they have the comparative advantage in, and then they trade the products that they made, this whole thing only holds together if the exchange rate is such that countries are exchanging products at a level that's between the 2 countries' opportunity costs for a given good. So here, you can think about this in terms of how many units of coffees would have to be given up for each 1 unit of prescription drug. So make sure you go back and either you check your notes or you recalculate the opportunity costs, and then think about what range of prices would be sufficient. And then the last question is, I'm going to give you a scenario, and then I want you to tell me how much each country is consuming. So let's suppose each country specializes in the production of the good they have the comparative advantage in. So know, first of all, which country has a comparative advantage in which thing, and then assume each country specializes 100% in producing just that thing. So either India will be making all coffee or all prescription drugs, and then Venezuela will either be making all coffee or all prescription drugs. So each country, you figure out what you're relatively good at, you just exclusively do that. Okay, so if each country specializes, and after the specialization, they trade 1 coffee for 2 prescription drugs, so this is the price I'm just kind of giving you, then what I want you to answer is how much coffee and prescription drugs would each country consume. So you kind of already know what they're producing, or you have to know what they're producing to start out answering this question. But what I want you to think about now is after the exchange and you bring all your goods home, and then what you have at home is what you can eat. Think about how much they're consuming at the end of the day. So how much stuff do they end up with at the end of all of the trading and specialization? So you're going to have 4 questions to answer today. I know these are a little bit more intensive, but they're going to be good practice for the exam. So if you're going through this and it's not clear, kind of put a sticky note in your notes so you can go back and study this. I will give you, again, the correct responses after you submit a answer. So jot down the correct responses and go back and study these. And then once you're solid on this, you'll be good to go. There is one to-do thing for next class. So we just finished chapter 3. So your to-do assignment for next class is to read chapter 4, which I'll be starting up next time I see you. So enjoy the rest of your day.